All right, I want to go over just a couple things with the environment scenes and a couple tools just that may help you out. Was that?
What happened to the gloves?
There was a fight. There was a fight and someone got kicked out.
Sounds normal.
Use default material. Okay. So looking at the scene, you can see that it's not just a standard thing where we don't have just like a clean thing. So just like our products, we have one product that was nice and clean, then we have the dirty one. So the dirty one helps tell a story. And ideally, that's what you want to do in your assignments is tell a story. You have plenty of opportunity in any of these scenes to give some kind of idea of something else that's in there. It does more than just, you know, for your own teacher wanting this. It actually makes it more interesting for someone to look at. Because if I just had this the way it was before, straight lines and everything, then I'd be like, okay, I get it, and then move on. But having it like this, where I have these things tipped over, now I have a little bit more story there. Having these cones out in here kind of tipped over, there's a little bit more story happening. These should all be at 3. Oh, 3, there we go. It's going to bother me if I don't have it there. Also, I have like the rugs here. And you can see that the rugs are also like kind of pulled and stretched and whatever else. And then I got, oops, here's my ATM.
Put a bang on the ATM like someone tried to rob it.
Right. And that'll be like something with texturing. I could have a texture for the screen being broke, right? Someone's in line, they're upset, they crack the screen. There's my garbage can that's kind of like jostled. Maybe I'll just push this in a little bit more. Someone kicked it. And then I have these cardboard boxes here. I don't know what I'm going to do with those yet. I just need something to fill up that space.
I'd have like the top one like ripped open. Because if they're just throwing away garbage, then they're not going to be like all pretty and perfect.
Right.
Unless they're crates.
Right. And there's lots of, that's where it really gets fun because you have a lot of place to play when you do that kind of stuff where it doesn't have to be super exact. Like my building here, my wall, that has to be pretty structurally sound. If I don't model this correctly and I'm just kind of like half-assing it and these things are just, you know, like, that's a little bit too drastic. There we go. Like this and like that. You know, it's not really going to look as nicely as it does when I take the time to actually make it look like that, okay? So certain areas of your scene have to be pretty much pristine as far as the geometry goes. Your lines need to be straight. You need to have nice bevels on there. You may need to work and rework a surface to get that to look correctly. Like I reworked this corner several times to get that to lay the way I wanted it to lay and to line up the way I wanted it to line up. Because I wanted to have these little indents here just to at least add some detail to my scene. Okay, before, if you remember, it was just that flat wall. That's all it was. So I needed something to break it up. So I added those little extrusions in there and pulled these little edges out. And then I beveled everything so it gives it a nice edge to it. Even like these things here, you can see how if I zoom in really close, there's even bevels on these things. So that when I hit 3, I get a nice little round piece here as opposed to that's kind of blocky. That's nice and round. Okay. Same thing here. Oops, that's actually sticking through the ground. I have to fix that. Let me just hit this. And no one's going to notice if I just did that. You didn't notice. There we go. Alright, so even like this little buckle right here, there's a little bevel right on this one side because I wanted to make it at least appear that there's something else there, that somewhere it latches. I could have also put a little extrusion on this side.
For the clip that
Right.
goes out.
For that little clip that you would use to pull out of there. And now, you're not going to see it up close, so I don't need to spend too much time on the detail of it, but from back here, I'll definitely see something there. I'll definitely see some bit of detail. And up close, it looks horrible. But far away, all these little details that we add are going to make it appear much, much nicer than it would otherwise. Even my velvet rope here, you'll see that I put a error crash. Boom. So I get my thing. because the one's crashing, so I'm just opening a new one. I didn't even wait for it to stop to actually crash all the way. I just opened a new one.
I think that's why it's crashing.
Work that.
Maybe you should save it as a copy just in case.
I have it on my other computer. There we go. Okay. So all of these pieces here, I've added super fine detail to it because I want to make sure that that it looks nice from pretty much any angle. Okay, any way that I'm looking at this, any shot that I'm going to do, it's going to look decent. Now again, I'm not going to be up close to these, so that's fine. But I maybe I'll have a shot from down here. Like one of my angles might be something like this, where I'm showing my club from down here, right? So I want to make sure that I have plenty of detail down here. Also, I may have something from up here or over there or wherever. So you want to make sure your stuff looks nice throughout. Even this bench over here, I took a cube, I stretched it out, I laid out the UVs for it, and then I distorted it. Add a bevel and distorted it. Okay, and then each one of these is a distortion of the previous one. So I didn't just duplicate it and go like this, because that's repetitive. This is the same thing all 4 times. So you have to change the shapes of these. Now, these 3 and these 3 are actually the same. I did just rotate those up so that they are the same board, so you really wouldn't notice that. And then even this here, these little legs are actually just the leg pieces back here that are holding this up. Okay. Now some of these you don't see that, right? I see some sort of indication of it through here, through the slats, but I don't think I'll ever be to the point where I need to see that these are intersecting. Okay. So that's just something that I'm keeping in mind. Also, I made this. There's my sign.
Did you use Boolean?
I did not. I modeled it correctly. And then I have my sign right there. Okay. So what I want to do is just go over a couple things. Now all the stuff that's here, I did a speed modeling video on my canvas. So if you go to Canvas and you look at the speed modeling, it's basically me just working for an hour and a half, but I sped it up so it's only like a half hour or so. Okay, so you can just watch me model stuff, lay out the UVs for it, and move on to the next piece. This piece here is actually one of the hardest pieces to lay out the UVs for because of all the different shapes and directions that it was doing. Now before I duplicated anything, I set it up. So before I duplicated any of these, I made sure that the UVs were set up on it. It does no good to model all the stuff and duplicate it and set it up, and then have to go back and lay out UVs and duplicate and whatever else.
Did you set up the UVs before you skewed them at all?
Yes. The easiest way to do it is right when they're square. So when these things were perfectly square, just laying like this, it's much easier to lay out the UVs than if they were like twisted and turned and whatever else. Okay. So even if I had an item that was like this in the real world, I would always flatten it out and straighten it so that it looked decent so I could lay out the UVs and project my stuff correctly. And none of these are like crazy UV layout things. Besides, you know, that little bracket there, everything else was pretty much just basic stuff. So a lot of these I did automatic mapping to. So if I look at my UVs for this and turn my image off and turn on my wireframe, oops, not my wireframe, turn off this, there we go. Come on, update. Alright, let's try this one. There we go. I'm not sure why that first one didn't want to update. Maybe there's 2 here. Yep, there's 2 there. Let me reset that one to get it back. Let me delete this one. There we go. Okay. So, all of these are square. Now, with something like this in here, it's a plank of wood. So what the top looks like and what the side looks like and the dividing line between them is pretty organic looking. It's not like if I did have a seam between them, anyone would really notice because of how they're lined up, how wood grain moves. So the way that I've set this up is I did automatic mapping, which gives me this. Okay. So just so you can see it, I'll do it to these like rickety pieces, which might turn out a little bit different. So I'm going to do automatic mapping. And it does this. It takes basically your shape and it just projects it in 6 different directions. Then I'm going to stretch it out like this to make this square. Come on, I clicked on you. There we go. Alright, and then I make sure it's square this way too. This way too. There we go. And then I make sure that it's square height-wise. Okay, and as long as they're square pretty much in all 3 directions, what I'll get over here is a pretty decent layout of UVs. Okay, because this is already a square object, it's projecting it in all 6 directions, so there's no real guesswork. It's just, there it is. And then of course I want to look at the UVs and make sure, so I always go through my shell and scale it up. Okay, and if I get an area that's looking kind of weird, like this board right here, I can go through and find out which board that is. If you right-click shell here, you can actually go into this view and click on that to see where it's at. There it is. Okay, so this is this shell piece right here. He's obviously not lined up correctly. So maybe I'll just go to edges, find out where his edges are supposed to be. There they are. This edge right there should probably be merged, and then I would merge it. Okay. Now with this, it's because I have the distortion, it's actually acting a bit funny. That's why I said before you do the distortion, lay out the UVs.
Would you want to do it before the bevels too?
No, I want to do it after the bevels, so the bevels are included in there. Otherwise, it'll smooth the bevels, and I don't want that. So I laid out the UVs. Now also look at where the UVs are for this. Oops, come on. So the UVs for this board are over here on the left side. So what that means is that when I bring in a piece of wood texture for this, I have that left side that's going to be using all of that wood for my board. And then for my variation, so I don't have the same wood texture on every single board, I have this other room. So that my next board I can scoot the UVs over for. And the next board I can scoot the UVs over. And each board I can kind of scoot this over, and it'll pick up a different piece of that texture, allowing me to make the boards seem like they're not all in one piece, or all basically duplicates. So just so you can see what that would look like. V-Ray material. Oops, you're over here. There you go. And I'll go to my color. I'll go to File, Folder, and I should have some wood textures inside of my, not that folder. A lot of wood textures, there we go. That's what's nice about saving your stuff, is that you have lots of different areas to pick from. So obviously finding something appropriate, that's probably the most appropriate I have. I think this would be fine wood or parquet floor. There we go. Oops. There we go. Okay, so there's the wood. I'm going to go to the place 2D texture. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. All right, so that looks pretty horrible because they're all picking up the exact same spot of wood from the texture because they're all laid on top of each other in the UVs. But if I go to my UV editor and I grab the shell and I just scoot it over, and I scoot this over, I scoot that over, you'll see already just by doing that simple trick how much better that's going to look, having every single board have a different texture to it. Okay? Then when I drop my bump on there, super easy, right? Because the bump's going to do the exact same thing. I don't have to move my UVs. My UVs are already laid out. It's just a matter of dropping the bump on, and then the bump will do its thing. Bump, bump, bump. 2D, file, this. There we go. I still need to rotate it 90 degrees. There we go. 90 degrees. There we go. Okay. So the UVs for the bump, or the texture for the bump, texture for the file are there. I may have to adjust my reflection. I may have to adjust my other properties. Okay. So overall, it's done. I don't have to touch it as far as, you know, tweaking it or anything. I'd most likely want to go into Photoshop and maybe find a better wood, number one, but also tone down some of the color. It's a little bit vibrant for such an old bench. Or add some paint with some flaking to it. That might be like a neat way to show that off too. So the same thing kind of on these things too. If I look at my UVs for it, you'll see where the UVs are at. And so I could, again, kind of sample from different areas of that texture to pull up different things, pull up a different way for this to look. Depending on how heroic, how centralized a specific item is in my scene, those are the items I want to pull into Mari and paint the texture right on those, okay? So I may have, let's say for these guys, I may have this, and this one be all textures that I just do inside here. But these two, at least, let's say I want to add a little bit more texture. Maybe the guy got pushed and he fell on there and he cut himself and now there's blood on them for whatever reason. So maybe those I want to take into Mari and add like some little blood lines or something, right? So I'd take these into Mari and I'd do a special texture for just these two because they're important to the scene. For my building here, I definitely want to take that into Mari and paint the texture on there to give it the look that I want to have. It's such a big item, it needs the detail, it needs the time to tweak it and make it look the way it should look. Same thing with these cones. I don't think this would be too difficult to go into Mari and just paint some different colors on them because these are very specific looking kinds of things. They're very unique things. So you'll see that if I had one cone, what was that other one? If I had one cone that had these smudges on it, and then I duplicated it and had smudges on all of them in the exact same spot, that would look kind of crappy. So something like this, I could quickly go into Mari and just paint some basic smudge marks, and then just apply that to each one inside there. Okay? So something like that I definitely want to play with.
Did you just go into like Photoshop
and create something?
One color?
Yeah.
Like a whole thing?
Yeah, I could just assign this to be just a texture that has those different kinds of smudges on it. The only issue with this is these UVs are broken up. So if I had a smudge on it that was like here, it would stop where this edge stops and pick up where this edge picks up. So it wouldn't flow all the way around. And it would look weird when I hit 3 for it to just stop right here. Right? So something like that, like I said, definitely want to paint it inside there. I also have my ground. You'll see I extruded the cement cracks here because I wanted just a little bit more detail to it, a little bit more depth. Didn't add a whole lot of geometry to it, so that was fine to do it that way. What else do I have in here? That's pretty much it. I got my sign right here. I did not lay out the UVs for the sign. This is how the UVs come, and I'm fine with leaving them just like that. This is the God of Partying, Dionysus.
Got a wine.
Got a wine?
And parties.
And parties. All right, so let me show you just a couple little tools, little techniques that I use that may help you out while you're doing your stuff. So for this sign, this is probably one of the most, difficult things that I modeled. I look at the basic shape of this, okay? So I'm looking at this profile of it going this way, this way, this way, this way, that way. And so what I did was I created a cube. And it doesn't matter what size it is because I can always resize it. And I delete those pieces. That way I only have just these couple sides. And then I can grab these edges and I can extrude them and pull them out, right? So if you have anything that has some sort of thickness to it, like my rugs, which I'll show in a second too, if you have anything that has some sort of thickness, don't try to model it with the thickness. Model it as a flat plane and then extrude it out to get the rest of the detail. It makes your life a lot easier. So what I need to do is I need to create a hole, a circle right in the middle. And I could use booleans, but I'm not crazy. I'm not going to use booleans. So I'm going to use my insert edge loop. And I'm going to go boom right here and boom right there. And then I'm just going to set each of these weights to 0.5. And what that does is it centers that so that it stays right in the center of that this division. Then I can go to my Then I can go to multi-cut, there we go. And I'm just going to draw a line from here to there. And then here to there. So I'm drawing basically just this like X pattern. And then I can draw another multi-cut. That goes right here. Okay, now let me go into my side view. There it is. Into my side view, and I'm going to create a cylinder. And I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to scale it down. And I'm going to add just the right amount of divisions. So this has 8 divisions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I made one with 8 divisions, and all I have to do is now move these points right to these corners. And again, it took me a second to do that, but now I have this hole, and I delete it. Okay, so now I have a hole right in there. It's not Boolean, so it's nice and clean. When I go to UV layout, it's not going to do anything freaky. If I need to hit 3 to smooth it, I can hit 3 to smooth it, and it doesn't freak out, which is awesome. And then I can duplicate this and scoot it up and line things up. Now, one of the tools that I always like to emphasize is your snapping tools. Okay, so in the first class we kind of introduced them a little bit, but they're super important, especially when we line things up. So holding down D allows us to move the pivot. Holding down V allows us to snap to point. So if I hold down D and V and I middle mouse button click and drag, I can snap this to any point that's on here. Okay, so I'm just snapping it right to this corner. So now when I duplicate and I bring it up, I want to snap it right to this corner. I just hold V and snap it, and it'll snap right to that corner. So now these two are perfectly in line with each other. Then I hold Shift, I tap D a bunch of times, and because the first one was accurate, the last one will be accurate. So you can see how huge this is. Doesn't matter, I just keep going. There we go, cool. And then I'm going to go to my outliner. I'm going to, there's my first item. Here's my last one. Nope. Yep, that's the, okay. So here's all the items here. So those are all the duplicates. Now I don't want to leave these as separate items. I want to combine them together. So I go to Mesh and I go to Combine. So now they're all combined pieces. If I go to Vertex though and I click on where they came together and I move, you'll see that they're actually combined but not joined. Okay? So now I'm going to go to my object mode again and say merge. Where are you at?
What would happen if you merge but you didn't combine?
It wouldn't let me. You have to combine. It has to be one object before you can merge. Okay? So now that I've merged, if I go to my vertices and click and move it, you'll see that it's all together. All right, so now I have this. I'll resize it so it's a bit closer to the size I need.
You didn't want that as much as well?
No. There we go. All right, so that's close enough. And then what I can do is I can go to, whoopsie, extrude, and then just extrude this out. Okay. Now if I were to hit 3, you'll see that I get this shape here, which actually doesn't look bad. If you look at the shape of them, they are pretty soft in what they look like. They're not super hard. No parking sign. It's hard to see, but yeah, it's a little bit softer than it's a little bit harder than this, but a little bit softer than what this is kind of showing. However, if I wanted to put a bevel on this, I can put a bevel on this no problem also. So what I'm going to do is I need to grab any edge. Oops. There it is. Any edge that's a hard edge, okay? Meaning that I don't want to put a bevel here. That doesn't make sense. If I put a bevel on the entire thing, which is rookie mistake number 1, when I hit 3, you can see that these are no longer round. They're like octagonal, right? Or hexagonal. Octagonal. So what I want to do is put a bevel just on these edges here. And then also all the edges like this. Okay? So the easy way to do that is I grab all the edges. And here's a neat little tool under Select, under Use Constraints. And I'm going to say I want you to select any angle that is from 50 to 120. So what this is going to do is it's going to find any edge that has an angle of 50 degrees, which is like this, to 120 degrees, which is like that. So basically anything that is moving in a different direction. So I say do this for the current and next selection, activate the angle, and you'll see how it just automatically grabbed every edge that I needed. So it's much quicker than trying to go through and click every single edge. So now we'll bevel. That's actually the default settings are good. So now when I hit 3, I get this nice shape. Okay, very simple, very easy to do. Now the way that I did this floor is the exact same way with this thing, but in a different set of settings. So let's say that I have a plane, whoopsie, a plane like this, and I want to create little divisions in the plane, like I want to create little notches. So what I did is I went through and I beveled everything in here. So I went to bevel. I'm going to take my fraction down to like 0.05. There we go. And you'll see how this creates these little lines. Okay, so now we have this pattern. So now what I want to do is I want to close these. I want to extrude just the dividing lines, right? I just want to grab where all those lines are and extrude them and push them in to create these little gaps where the sidewalk would be. So if I go to my select constraints, I have to reset this. So let me just say reset and pick it. So what I want to do is go to faces and basically pick all of these. Now again, look how tedious this is going to be, trying to select each one of these like this and then doing that. Oops. Okay, horrible. So I'm going to use a constraint to do it. If I go to select, I go to constraints, I say current and next, I go to geometry, and then the one I'm going to use for this one is area. So basically I want to say I want to select things that are within a certain area range. I have no idea what their area range is. I just know they're pretty small, right? So these edges here, these faces here, are pretty small compared to that one. So they should have a smaller area to those. So just as a guess, I'm going to put in 10 as my max. So I hit activate, and you'll see what it selected, just those lines. So now I can extrude, and then I can push it down. And now I have these little dividing lines right here. Okay? Now if it wasn't 10, let's just pretend that I wasn't perfect and I made a mistake. Let's say I put 60 in here and hit current. Okay? So 60 obviously is too big. So then I say, okay, well 60 is too big. 50, 40, come on. 30, 20. There we go. So 20 got us there. No big deal. It selected them for us, right? We just keep tweaking the number until we get exactly what we want. We could even isolate just these smaller ones, or just the smaller ones if we lower it even further. If I say 2, or 1. There we go. So now I've isolated just the little dots. Okay. Now you could also use this to grab, let's say, the opposites. Let's say I did 10. I have to remarquee it. There we go. I could just uncheck this, close and reset, make sure I'm still on face, and I can hold shift and marquee it, and now it'll actually grab the opposite. So now it's deselected all these ones here and reselected all the other pieces. So then I could extrude that. Where's my mover? There he is. And I could pull it up a little bit. I could give this a little bit of offset. 0.1. There we go. And turn my wireframe off. Okay. So using these kinds of tools are extremely helpful because it just makes your life a lot easier, right? You just have to get in there and you have to play with what these things are doing. All right. So now here's the fun one. So this cloth that's here, you can see the shape of this. It actually feels like or looks like the cloth was at some point pushed, right? So it looks like someone stepped on it and pushed the cloth, and that's why it's kind of wrinkled up the way it is. So yeah, should have room to do this. Let me just delete my history on this thing. There we go. Cool. All right. So what I did is I created a polygon plane. There we go. And I roughly sized it to what the cloth would look like the first day they put it down. Right? So the first day that it was nice and neat, roughly like that. Okay. So then I need to create square divisions. Right now, each one of these faces is a rectangle. So I'm going to go to my plane. I'm going to go to my height or width. See, I'm not perfect. Damn it. There we go. And I'm going to keep stretching this out until I get these things to look square. So there's 80, 90, 100. There we go. So that's 100 divisions one way, 10 divisions the other way. And I get something that looks pretty square. Maybe a little bit more or less. That looks better square. Okay. So there's a lot of divisions. The more divisions I have here, the more accurate this is going to be, the more detail I can add to it, right? So if I wanted a lot of detail, I would actually up this number. I'd go to 180 and 20, and I would have a whole lot of detail inside here. So once I have this, I'm going to go to my FX. I'm going to go to my Ncloth. I'm going to go to Create Ncloth. So what that does is it makes that piece of polygon an Ncloth object. So I'm going to right click on my timeline, make sure this is set to play every frame, and then I'm going to rewind it and hit play. And what will happen is it falls down. Okay? And you'll see that it lands right on the ground. Because I already set this up, it already had the collision on there. So if it didn't, I would go to Ncloth, create a collider. And what that does is it makes my cloth collide with my ground. Okay? So I click the ground, I say Ncloth, passive collider, and now they collide with each other. So you can see just by doing this, I actually get some pretty decent results. Like that could look like how the carpet was laid. Let me rewind it again, click on this again. Now I did have some other options set up. Under my under this cloth on the far right, there's a nucleus. And this is kind of like, what are the properties of the world? What is happening to this? So I added some wind noise. So the wind noise is what's going to give it a little bit of ruffling. If there's zero noise to this and it falls down, it's going to fall pretty much flat. Okay, so it doesn't look very interesting because it's perfectly flat. Cranking up some of this wind noise, let's just go with 30. Rewind it and hit play. There we go. And now it's bunched up. There was a big tussle in the streets. Let's rewind this and go to 10. There we go. Okay. So what I do is I rewind it, I change settings, I play it, and then I do this over and over and over again until I'm happy with the results. Okay? Until I get what I want this to look like. So here, that looks pretty cool how this is laid out too. So let's pretend that I like this. So I just duplicate it. When I rewind it, the other one's still up here. So I can actually just take this and scoot it aside, and I'll just maybe use that for something else. Okay? Now to get this one to do what it did, what I did was I rotated it like this. And what's going to happen is it's going to fall down and it's going to start sliding towards the right. Maybe. Yep. So you can see how it's sliding towards the right. So what I did was I said, I don't want you to slide towards the right. I'm going to make a cube. Right there. And I'm going to make the cube a colliding object. And then I'm going to hit play, and what's going to happen is it's going to bunch up in the cube, against the cube. Okay, and again, I play it until I'm satisfied with where it's at. Oh, that's kind of neat. Fell off into the street. Oh, man. All right, I got to make this ground here. I got to make this a colliding object also. Unreference that.
Like it stick a little better? Or no?
What was that?
Like stickier?
I can make it stickier, yes. I can also play with some of these properties. So like on the cloth itself, there's presets, and you can choose different presets that are here. So if I want this to be like concrete, I can hit play, and it'll be like concrete. So it's basically going to be fall down straight like that. And I can make this like water balloon. Okay, so it's not going to look like a water balloon, obviously, but it'll just kind of behave like a water balloon would. The one that I used for this was silk, because that gave me the best look for creating these kinds of like ripples to it. There we go. Oh, why are you blowing off of there now? That doesn't make sense.
The wind noise is still up.
I know, but it wasn't that high. I'm going to make these guys colliders too. I could also take my wind direction and crank it down. So this is X, Y, and Z. So by pushing it -5 down, it's basically saying go towards the ground faster. Oops, I forgot to change my wind noise down a little bit less. It's getting there.
Slowly.
Now obviously we gotta wait till the whole thing does it, otherwise it's gonna look weird.
So you just like pause it where you like and then freeze it?
You just duplicate it. And then once I'm happy with what I got, I'll delete the one that's moving around. So I'm gonna wait until this gets like that. So that's kind of cool the way that is. I'm going to duplicate it. I'll even play it, and maybe I'll get a better one. You may have to increase your time. So if you only have like 4 frames, you're not going to have time to simulate it. So you just have to let it go. Add more frames to it. All right, there we go. All right, now it looks like this is kind of floating. I'm going to click on my ground, maybe. Click on my ground. There it is. Go to my collision thickness and lower this down. Sometimes it comes in with ridiculous numbers. And so I'm just lowering these numbers so that it collides a little bit closer to it. Otherwise, it's going to be a little bit further away and look like it's floating like it does here. There we go.
It has like a force field?
Well, yeah, it's just like a little margin that goes around it. All right, that's kind of neat the way that is. So I'll duplicate that. All right, so I'm happy with the way that looks. So I'm just going to delete this one. I don't need that one anymore. So now I have these two. This one I can maybe scoot down here, let's say. I can delete that box.
So wait, the ones that you duplicated, now if you hit play, they don't move, right?
Correct. I hit play, it's just back to normal. They're locked in. Okay, so it's a neat way to be able to just model something even, right? Then to give it thickness, because right now all of these are paper thin. So I just extrude it and just pull that up a little bit. That's all you have to do, see? But you never want to try to simulate you're going through this. What are you doing? You can't go through the hole. There we go. You never want to simulate a thick surface because it'll actually, it will go through itself. It's not a perfect system. So you always want to do it flat, like this.
And you want to lay the UVs out before you do anything?
You actually don't need to lay out the UVs because of it being a plane. The UVs are already laid out. You may just have to tweak it afterwards, because if I were to put my checkerboard on either of these, it's going to come out stretched. But then I could just go to the shell and stretch it out this way, and they'll be square. And then I just shrink it down until it fits inside here. Now if we had a different shape, because Ncloth could actually be anything, I could make this an Ncloth if I wanted to, right? I'd lay out the UVs first on that if I needed to. Just for fun real quick, let's just make this Ncloth. I'm going to actually smooth it out, so we go to mesh, we go to smooth. Okay, because we need more divisions. This really doesn't have a whole lot of divisions in it. There we go. Okay. And then we'll go to Ncloth, make it Ncloth. We'll watch it fall.
It's so oddly satisfying.
Oh, that's so weird.
Even more entertaining.
Are the velvet ropes hand-cloth too?
They are not. Those are just hand modeled in that direction. But if this was an animation where I wanted to actually show the velvet ropes swaying, I could definitely use that, right? Or if I had a flag, right? I had a flag on the side of this building. I could have the flag waving. Lots of different things. I could put trash in the street. I could use
What are the things that you use to hold it?
constraints. Okay, so let's make a flag real quick in case someone wants to make a flag. So I'll make a plane here. I rotate it. It's a huge flag. Still make these things square. We always make them square. There we go. The more divisions we have, the more detail we put in there. If this was left at the previous one, it would look very chunky as it waves. So I want to make sure I have a lot. Clicky, Ncloth, Ncloth. Rewind it. Okay, right now it's going to fall. There it goes. So I'm going to grab the vertices. Let's say I grab a few here and a few down here. And I go to End Constraint and I say Transform. So now, wireframe unshaded, there we go. Now I hit play and you'll see that it stays up. Those transform constraints hold the item right where it's at. Now obviously this looks kind of stupid because it's just falling down. That's where we kick up our wind. So this is going to go in the Z direction, so I'm going to say go like 30 in the Z direction. That's probably too much. Or not enough. 152. Alright, I may have to rewind this and then hit play. Nope, there's just a lot of stuff in there. This might fly off.
Maybe you need to tweak the
No, this should be working. Let's take the air density up. Oh, I think it's blowing the wrong direction. Negative.
No.
Oh, it's the right direction. It's just being stupid.
Is it taking into account the environment?
It shouldn't. It should just be, this is the positive Z direction, is to the left. It should just be blowing that way. Let's take the air density off. I don't know what it's doing. Oops.
Would it be the speed?
Nope, shouldn't be speed. Because this, oh, yep, sorry. Wind speed. Thank you. Rewind that again.
Should be a combination of speed and density. No, dense.
There we go. It's going. That was it.
Now it's gone.
Now it's gone. I just destroyed it. There we go. So let's take this air density back to 1. Let's take the wind speed down to 5. Let's add some wind noise. Wind speed up a little bit. There we go. Alright, so there's our flag blowing in the wind. Pretty cool.
So if you wanted to render an animation with it waving in the wind like that, you just don't duplicate it, you just leave it as it is?
Just leave it as it is. Yep. And if you do any animations with Ncloth, you should go to Ncache and make a cache. Because right now, if I were to click and drag, you'll see how it's not updating at all because it has to calculate every single frame. So when I rewind this and hit play, it's calculating frame 1 to get to 2 to get to 3 to get to 50. So I would do a cache, which basically writes out the information. So right now what it's doing is it's saving all this information to my hard drive so that I can click around the timeline and it won't change. Now it's important when you do that stuff because if, let's say you rendered 50 frames and it crashed and you went to go back to render frame 51, your flag's not going to animate because it doesn't have the first 50 frames to figure out where it's supposed to be. So I'm just going to hit escape because that's plenty of frames. So now you can see I can click and drag and it updates that animation. And it's going to be the same every single time. Pretty cool.
So, what if it wasn't?
Alright. So this should get you like a good foundation for a lot of your stuff you're doing. If you want to add debris to your scene, you can use the same kind of stuff. Like you can grab a plane, make this Ncloth, and just wait for it to fall a certain way. And just duplicate it, and there it is. There's one. Yep. There's another one.
You put it in your garbage can.
Yep. There we go. Lots of different things we have there. Alright, so I'm going to save this monstrosity. It's really disheveled here. There's a lot of stuff going on.
There's a hurricane coming through.
There must be. Alright. So, continue working on your products, get those turned in, and then you can start working on your environments while it's rendering your stuff out. Cool?